once was a man who had some land in eastern Washington. And on his land, this man, he had a deep, dark hole upon. People came from miles around to throw their trash down in to see how deep the hole was and listen for its end. Then one day, that fateful day, they forced Mel off his land. They paid him off and sent him off down under with a plan. They hid Mel's hole and covered it up so ne'er it could be found, so no one would ever know what's deep down in Mel's ground. Yippee-yi-yay. Yourself in eastern Washington and hear the legend of Mel's Hole, be wary, my dear one. Don't ride alone at night on that Manastash Ridge, but listen carefully to the moaning deep within.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on My Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, we try to be. Anyway, the compound today, I'll tell you, it's beautiful weather, but it is cold. And then my furnace quit working, so I'll tell you, it is really cold here in the studio here tonight. I'll tell you that. You know, in the summertime here, I can't run the air conditioner in the studio because it makes too much noise. But wintertime here, I tell you, I can't run the heat because it gets, whatever. So I'm sitting here right now, freezing my little butt off. But anyway, in the news tonight, the administration, the Trump administration said, hey, we don't care about the radiation and chemicals. If it's more contaminated than what it has been in the past, it's no big deal. So they're going to raise the standards where they can actually contaminate. Well, you can go out and contaminate more before you get in trouble. Well, what can I say? The administration is just doing some real weird things day after day. Now the EPA is set to raise the exposure for radiation. In other words, you can actually get more irradiated than in the past with buying food or whatever. The milk you drink, it can have more radiation in it. Well, you know what? I don't know. And then you still have Japan that's about ready to dump all that radioactive waste from their reactors into the Pacific Ocean. So, when you go out here maybe next summer or whatever, and you go out and buy some salmon, you better turn the light off first and see if it glows before you eat it. And now they're also saying, which is really interesting, the scientists came out today and said, we got to stop cutting trees down. We got to stop cutting all these trees down in the Amazon and all over the world because you know what? Global warming, it's actually more damaging than trying to reduce the emissions from all the cars. And the cows. And speaking about cows, they blamed a lot of this on the cows. The farting of cows? Well, in Antarctica, a lake is kind of formed. It's burping out more methane gas than all the cows in the world. So, hey, don't blame it on the cows. Yeah, maybe McDonald's or something. I don't know. We'll be right back right after this with Rob Morphy, and here we go.
Night Dreams, Scary Story Night on Friday nights. Call in at 9:30 p.m. Pacific at 1-253-203-6695.
Well, Rob, how you doing tonight?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and you just had a long day at work, too, and it's kind of late where you're at, isn't it? You're getting late?
It's about 10 p.m., not so late. Plus, I'm a night owl, so actually this is about mid-afternoon for me.
Oh, yeah. A while back, a trucker network tried to get me to do an all-nighter, and I said, no, I'm just too old for that. It's just no way I could sit there and go from 12 o'clock midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning and do a talk show and plus play music? I don't know. I'm too old.
Well, it just depends on if you're diurnal or nocturnal. I think you have a predisposition, and we all just rock to it, regardless of age. I'm in my mid-40s now, and I have always been I'm an illustrator and a graphic designer by trade, so for some reason the creative juices for me really start kicking in as the sun goes down. So I've been lucky that, especially in cases like this, when I get to talk to folks like you, this is in my prime time, and I'm not like fending off with yawns and massive doses of coffee.
Well, it's funny. I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to take my daughter to work. She works at the local hospital. So I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I come back, and because our shows, just like your podcast, is all worldwide, and I get a couple hundred emails a day, from my fans for the show. So I make a point, I answer every single one of them. So now all of a sudden it's like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. When I get done with it, then I spend the next like 4 or 5 hours, booking guests onto the show and then playing around in the studio, making sure things are going to work that night. The next thing I know, it is about ready to go on the air. So, and then my night is over about 11, 12 o'clock at night. So, I don't get much sleep.
No, that is a packed day, my friend.
Well, it gives me something to do at my age. Well, either that or I'd be riding my Harley, one of the two. So, I'd rather be doing this. Now, why don't you tell everybody what you do, Rob?
Well, what I do is I run a website called cryptopia.us. Now, this used to be called American Monsters, and we founded it, I and my partner, Mark Storrs, in about 2001. So we did this way back at the turn of the millennia. Now it's way back now. It still seems like it just happened. And what we want to do is kind of create a series that would, or I should say, a series of articles that would help illustrate in all these different categories the most significant cryptozoological phenomenon across the world. And so quickly I found myself, trying to use these journalistic skills that I developed over the years. I'd been a reporter for various local newspapers. I'd been an illustrator. And finally I thought, I want to put these skills to something I'm fascinated by, which in this case happens to be cryptids. So we built this website, and we put all these articles out there. We started getting attention from different networks. We actually had to deal with MTV to do a series for a while. All that was fun and exciting, but really it kept me focused on this project of passion, which is something I've been fascinated about since I was a kid: ufology, monsters, the whole nine yards. And so last year, what we finally decided to do, my partner Mark Storrs and our friend Chris Carnicelli, we decided, let's just do a podcast where we can really just express how much we love this, not just in terms of these like lavishly researched articles and thoroughly illustrated, all of these things that just kind of sit still on the screen. Let's present it with the kind of enthusiasm that we actually feel for it. And so just under a year ago, we started the Cryptonaut podcast, which can be found on like iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all the media. And people have just been loving it and responding very well, just in the way we hope. So basically, I've been able to take a childhood passion for unknown mysteries and kind of channel it into both a way where I can use my writing and art skills to really delve into it, and also my love of just basically talking, as you can probably tell already, to express that also to a wider audience. So that's basically, what I've been doing. It's still a project of passion for the three of us, and it's really just the thing I love doing most in the world.
Well, Rob, right now, the hottest thing it is right now UFOs, aliens, and monsters, and horror flicks on, cable TV, the old, films from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. People are all into that type of thing, and it seems like they're, like UFOs and alien thing kind of dropped off the radar quite a bit for quite a few years. And that I just noticed here in the last 6-7 months is this really, at least for me on my show, it's really surging.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of my fascination for this stuff stemmed from two different sources. Film, especially because, I was a child. I was born in the 70s, so I came of age during the Close Encounters of the Third Kind sort of renaissance that basically just reintroduced a whole generation to this idea of extraterrestrial contact and how wonderful and extraordinary it could be. So it was cinema, and it was the original In Search of series by Alan Landsberg, narrated, of course, by the late, great Leonard Nimoy. And so this sort of confluence of 1970s just sort of embracing of both extraterrestrial and cryptozoological themes in the pop culture was sort of the primordial stew from which this interest came. And I did notice, too, one of the reasons that we started what is now Cryptopia.us back in the early 2000s was that there was a huge dearth, a big cavity of paranormal research and documentaries and things like that in pop culture. It's like there's histories, mysteries, and a few handful of other things, but all of it had pretty much dropped off the face of the earth by that point. One of the reasons we wanted to start this website was so that we could help fill that void, but I've noticed that in the years since then, it has increased and increased, and I expected it to kind of fall off again. Instead, like you say, even in the last 6 months, it has literally exploded. I think there's something in the mass consciousness that people are not only fascinated by the unknown, and it's something that I think both titillates and distracts us from like the trials and tribulations of day-to-day life, but I think that maybe there's a sense that maybe something extraordinary might be coming. I'm not claiming to be a prophet, nor am I claiming to have some inside knowledge of this, but it really feels like more than ever before in my life, even including in the 70s when people seemed utterly fascinated by it, and I used to see paperbacks in every grocery store I went to about UFOs or Bigfoot. It seems like now more than ever, the world is really focusing its attention on the unknown and being fascinated by these mysteries.
Well, you know what it was, too? I think what happened is because of the cable channels and a particular network mainly, bringing on ghost hunting. Everything was like ghost hunting groups. I'm not against ghost hunting groups, but it got to be so many of them and so much. I think a lot of people out there just started getting burned out about it. And, things happen, back, was it November when they released that couple-year-old film from the two pilots from the aircraft carrier supposedly encountering a UFO, their cockpit, talking back and forth to the aircraft carrier, talking to each other, and they try to catch whatever it was, and they couldn't catch it. And when that got released and started circulating with it, the government didn't deny it. And then, Rob, right after that, we had the Secretary of the Air Force, giving to the graduating cadets a speech. And, he said some strange things like the next war will not be on ground. It will not be, on our Earth. It'll be out in space. That's where our next war will be. He said that, and that kind of got people going, Then, about 2 months later, our president makes a little joke about, maybe I should create a space force, which I already know there's probably one anyway. But he said that. And then several months later, they kind of, said, hey, to the Pentagon, why don't you look in and see what we have to do to create one? I mean, it's drawn people's interest. And Steve Bassett, when he was on my show, he said that he thinks it's probably within a year before the government starts really admitting, at least our government, admitting that there is objects out there.
I think they've essentially admitted it already with a lot of the footage they've released recently through that project by the guy from Blink-182, the To the Stars Academy stuff. I think they've tacitly acknowledged that there are UFOs in the strictly speaking definition of unidentified flying and, of course, being objects. But in terms of full disclosure, it's something that I think we have waited for so long. I think most, not just Americans, I think most people in the world understand that there's something there. There is something unknown, apparently technological, and seemingly far in advance of terrestrial abilities in terms of our technological capabilities and so forth. What we're always unsure of is what its source is. Is it extraterrestrial, interdimensional? Is it something temporal like time travelers? We really don't know that. And I'm not entirely convinced that the government, though I do think they probably have downed craft, and I think a lot of the stories that have become the stuff of legend are based on more than kernels of truth. I think it would be roughly the equivalent of a Neanderthal